towards Radford. Up he goes! Oh, Radford! My goodness, what a leap! And going on again, a good-looking drive! Oh, there it is! By Radford!
He never demanded spotlight, he never chased headlines. But when Arsenal needed goals, when silverware was still a dream, John Radford answered every time. He was there when the club rose from drought to glory, when European nights returned to North London, when the roar of the double echoed from Highbury to Wembley. And still, the world looked past him. He didn't have the swagger of a star, he didn't score with flair, he scored with purpose, week after week, season after season. While others etched their names in memory with flash, he wrote his in sweat, in hard yards, in decisive moments that changed Arsenal history. But time has a cruel way of forgetting the quiet ones. And in the story of Arsenal's rise, the one who kept finding the net has too often been left out of the narrative. This is not a tribute born of nostalgia, it's a correction, a restoration of a name that should never have faded. John Radford, the finisher behind the trophies, the heart beneath the headlines, the legend the modern game forgot to mention. Subscribe, because we honor the ones who built the club, not just the ones who sold the shirts. John Radford was born on the 22nd of February 1947 in the coal-stained town of Hemsworth, West Yorkshire, a place where hard work came before everything, and football wasn't a career. It was an escape. There were no scouts circling him at school, no golden path waiting, just frost on the ground and boots that didn't fit. But even then, he was different. Not loud, not flashy, just serious. Still, sharp in the way he moved when defenders blinked. In 1962, at the age of 15, he was taken in by Arsenal Football Club, not as a prodigy, but as an apprentice, which meant sweeping floors, scrubbing boots, and earning his place in silence. While others dreamed out loud, he went to work. There were no interviews, no headlines, just hours, hardening his game under North London skies. And by February of 1964, he was offered his first professional contract. No fanfare, no first-class welcome. Just a signature and the keys to the dressing room that still didn't know his name. But it would, because in the shadows of Highbury, a forward was forming. One who wouldn't ask for attention, but would take every chance the game gave him. He didn't wait his turn. He made himself unavoidable. On the 21st of March 1964, barely 17 years old, John Radford walked out for his Arsenal debut against West Ham United. A quiet boy in a man's game, wearing the badge like it belonged to him. He didn't score that day. He didn't need to. Because everyone watching knew, the way he moved, the way he timed his runs, this wasn't a hopeful apprentice. This was a forward. By the time the next season arrived, Radford wasn't waiting on the bench anymore. He was scoring goals that made defenders panic and made older strikers nervous. Then came Wolves. 2nd January 1965. 3 goals, 1 match, and just 17 years and 315 days on the clock. No Arsenal player had ever scored a hat-trick that young, no one ever has since. That was the moment. Not a goal, a claim. A quiet boy from Hemsworth, telling Highbury, "I'm not here to watch, I'm here to lead the line." And that line, Arsenal's famous red and white, that line that stretched through Baston and Wright and Henry, had just found its next name. By the end of the 60s, John Radford was no longer the apprentice. He was the answer. Goals came in bursts, not the kind that made the front page, but the kind that changed results. In the 1968-69 season, he led Arsenal in scoring. 19 goals, a run to the League Cup final, and for the first time in years, the club felt close to something again. But it wasn't until 1969-70 that the drought truly began to break. Arsenal were chasing the Intercities Fairs Cup, a European trophy they had never touched. And Radford, he wasn't just scoring in the early rounds, he was saving his sharpest cuts for the end. In the second leg of the final, Arsenal needed goals. They needed belief. They needed someone who didn't flinch under pressure. Radford delivered, scored with calm, played like he'd been there 100 times. And when the whistle blew and Arsenal held the cup aloft, it ended 17 years of waiting. 17 years of almost. That night, the glory didn't belong to one man, but in the heart of it, stood the Yorkshire forward with no celebration in his eyes. Just the look of a man who knew this was only the beginning. 1970-71. The season Arsenal stopped chasing greatness and became it. They won the league, they won the FA Cup, they did the double, and behind every key goal, every moment that tilted history in their favour, stood John Radford. That year, he scored 21 times, not from penalties, not from easy chances, from movement, from instinct, from understanding what a team needed before they even asked for it. He wasn't just scoring, he was building. Alongside Ray Kennedy, Radford formed a partnership that defenders couldn't contain. Between them, they bagged 47 goals that season, two forwards, completely different styles, but tuned to each other like clockwork. And when the games got tight, when glory looked like it might slip away, Radford turned provider. In the FA Cup semi-final versus Stoke, he delivered the decisive assist to Kennedy, the moment that sent Arsenal to Wembley. In the final versus Liverpool, he created space, drew defenders, fed Eddie Kelly, fed Charlie George, fed the legacy. Others hit the headlines, others raised arms. But deep in the match footage, you'll always find Radford. Not chasing attention, just pulling strings. That double didn't belong to one star. It belonged to a system, a spirit. And no one embodied that more than the forward who kept showing up in the biggest games and leaving without applause. That season, Arsenal became immortal. And John Radford was right there in the shadows, making it all possible. After the double, the noise shifted. New players arrived, the headlines changed hands. But John Radford stayed. He stayed through 1971-72, scoring, assisting, carrying Arsenal back to the FA Cup final once more. And when Bob Wilson went down in the semi-final, it was Radford, not the keeper, who pulled on the gloves. Minutes later, he was back up front, scoring the winner in the replay. That was Radford. He didn't ask what the team could do for him. He asked where they needed him and did it without complaint. In 1972-73, he finished top scorer again. 19 goals. No banners, no interviews, just consistency. But time catches everyone. The body began to whisper what the mind didn't want to hear. Knees slowed. Matches piled up. And in the stands, the crowd began to murmur new names. By 1973-74, the goals dried up. Single figures, less minutes, fewer chances. Still, he stayed, he trained. He wore the shirt with the same weight he always had. But behind the scenes, Arsenal was already moving on. Malcolm MacDonald, Frank Stapleton, younger legs, louder presence. Radford didn't rage, didn't make it public. He did what he always did, showed up, put in the work, waited for the call that never came. By 1976, it was clear. The club had changed, and the man who once led the line was now just another name on the team sheet. But not to those who watched him at his peak. To them, he was still the one who never needed glory to give everything. There was no farewell banner, no send-off under the lights of Highbury. Just a quiet transfer slip and a name scratched off the team sheet. In December 1976, after 14 years, John Radford left Arsenal Football Club. He didn't ask for a testimonial, didn't announce his goodbye, he just packed his boots and walked across London to West Ham United. At Upton Park, he found no rhythm, no chemistry, no joy, 28 league appearances, no goals. And the man who once led Arsenal to Europe, who'd lifted the FA Cup at Wembley, was now drifting through matches where his name meant little. But he didn't stop. In 1977, he signed for Blackburn Rovers, a club in the second division. He played 38 games, scored 10 goals, and did it all without needing the cameras to care. Then came Bishop's Stortford, non-league football, the muddy end of the road, where no reporters came, but the game still mattered. And there, in front of smaller crowds on worn-out pitches, Radford won again. The FA Trophy, the Isthmian League. Because greatness doesn't vanish when the lights do. And some men carry class even after the world stops watching. He didn't complain. He didn't chase one last headline. He just kept playing. Because football was never about the spotlight, it was about doing the job right. And no one did it quieter or better than John Radford. He gave them everything: goals, assists, glory, and when it was over, the silence was deafening. John Radford is still Arsenal's fourth highest all-time goalscorer, behind only names that became statues. 149 goals, 481 appearances, more than Bergkamp, more than Wright in appearances, more than Fabregas, more than Van Persie, more than nearly every man they now chant from the stands. And yet, no mural in marble, no grand return under the lights, no England legend status either. Just 2 senior caps, handed out and forgotten, while the country missed a forward who always delivered but never demanded. He won Arsenal the Fairs Cup, the club's first ever European trophy. He lifted the double. He carried them through drought years and played across eras of change without ever changing who he was. Ask the ones who were there and they'll tell you. He was the glue, the worker, the man who made others shine. Ask history? It barely answers. But the numbers remain. The memories remain. And the truth is loud, even when the man never was. He left the pitch, but he never left the club. After the boots were hung, after the headlines moved on, John Radford stayed close to the only crest that ever mattered. He managed Bishop's Stortford in the lower leagues, coached youngsters at Queen's Park Rangers, passed on what couldn't be taught, how to play without ego, how to finish without fear. But it's at Arsenal where his shadow still walks. Tour the Emirates and you might find him quietly telling stories to the next generation, not about himself, but about the knights that built the badge. He never asked to be remembered, but he remembers everything. Charlie George once said it plainly. Raddy never got the credit he deserved. He wasn't flashy, but he did everything. Goals, assists, work rate. He made the rest of us look better. And Frank McClintock, the captain who lifted the double, never forgot. John was the heart of our attack. A proper team man. Never moaned, always gave his best. We don't win the double without him. Today, he lives in Thaxted, Essex. He is 78 years old, still married to Engel, his partner since 1968. 2 sons, grandchildren, a quiet life, far from cameras, but never far from Arsenal. Because some players chase greatness, others become part of it. Not by noise, but by example. This is not a eulogy. This is memory. This is justice. This is legacy. Subscribe if you still believe in the men who led with silence and left with everything in order.